The Tonfa sword is more useful than I thought.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
We have recently looked at the size in a medieval combat frame, and we've recognized that there are some mechanics that remind on the Japanese tonfa, and that's due to the special design of the handle. To be honest, when I started out experimenting with the size, I had no size at hand, and so I was misusing a giant sword for it. More specifically, I was using Mihawk's sword, and I also recently had a video on this sword. And I somehow recognized that does not feel so bad. So, does it make sense to have a sword like Mihawk's sword with a strongly expressed crossguard in a tonfa type of hold? And that's what we want to experiment around here. And the point is, it's not as bad as I thought. I really thought this is stupid, and there are other YouTubers that have expressed that probably the Tonfa grip is very, very useless, but there's more to it. And the interesting point is here, if I have a large sword, it's more similar to the situation in the scythe, which means I can generate quite some force with this. Of course, the direction of cuts is very, very different from the size because of the orientation of the blade. But what we recognized early is that you can generate a hell lot of force with that, even with our wood prop that we use here. We can produce quite some cutting force, and that was in fact quite surprising. Also, if we go in bind situations and press, this is more advantageous than some of the classical holding techniques. I think this is due to the space, and I think that's also why the size is used how it's used. The size needs to be swung hundreds of times on one day when you use it. So it's about energy efficiency. And this might be really something that in this orientation of the hands I can generate more force than in our normal way of holding the sword. Do I have to sacrifice something? Yeah, definitely. So for example, my hand protection is definitely worse than it was before. But if I gain force with it, should I do it? What else can I get from it? There's an interesting transition, and we've recognized that also with the size and with the tonfa. You can basically very easily change from a normal orientation, so long range, to a kind of a reverse orientation. That's part of the strength, how force is generated with this type of grip, because this change is a bit related also to the slide strike mechanics with the Hanbo, and I will link a video on that aspect in the description box as well, and allows us a very efficient and, how to say, narrow way of getting a lot of acceleration. So we can produce a lot of force without having a long way of the attack. So this is pretty neat. Also, the ability to switch to the kind of reverse grip makes it interesting. If I get in bind and I have to get into grappling situations, we can easily have this switching grip, and then we are nicely prepared and we can, for example, strike with the pommel and things like that. So I'm in fact quite surprised how much you can do with that. And it's even more surprising if we look at it. You don't have to hold it like a tonfa. A tonfa is pretty much useless if you hold it on the wrong side. This is not the case with the sword. If I grasp the crossguard on the other side, I can still generate a lot of force and I can still have part of the advantages. It's maybe even better concerning the hand protection. So the question is, of course, there are many swords with crossguards, and this seems to work. Do we have any idea whether there's a reality of tonfa grip in historical sources? And there it gets tricky. So if we look into the books, into the fencing manuals, then we can see sometimes that there are situations where the depicted warriors or however you want to call them, grasp the sword by the crossguard, but none of that looks like a real Tonfa grip. We could still argue that if they have gripped it in this way and then they get somehow attacked, they might have used it in this way. And this was already one of my arguments behind the reverse grip and why it's still necessary to train that. Also, this video is linked in the description box. There are situations where you simply have the sword in this type of grip, and then you should make use of it instead of trying to re-grip it. And I think the same should be true for this Tonfa grip. If I have it like that, then I also should use it like that if I'm in an emergency situation. And it's interesting to see that there are depictions from late medieval and early modern times where people would present their sword in front of them and hold it by the crossguard. And if this is, for example, a posture of demonstration of power and maybe also demonstration of a certain, let's say it like that, non-aggressiveness, it still would mean, if you know the Tonfa grip and its advantages, you would be less aggressive, but you would not be vulnerable. So that's also a theme in Japanese culture, because there are also some positions considered polite or non-aggressive, and there was still training of using these positions if I get attacked to my advantage. There could be something like Tonfa grip applications if I make such a position and I get attacked and I do something with it. Does it mean it's a good grip? Yeah, probably not. I mean, in free flow situations, I rarely use it. We have now here specifically looked at that. Let's assume I have it like that. Can I make use of it? And we can make the point it's not as bad as, for example, reverse grip if I have a two-handed hold. With a single hand, with just the right hand, with my lead hand on the crossguard, I cannot do a lot. I can do some emergency strikes, maybe, but I don't have control. I cannot really go in bind properly. There's not a lot like that. With two hands, this is really a different thing, and I think that should also make us reconsider some of the arguments that have been waged in advantage or in disadvantage of the one or other grip. For example, concerning the reverse grip, a lot of the discussion about the reverse grip is about a one-handed reverse grip, and I've already made the point that the one-handed reverse grip is only one of several reverse grips. And a lot of the mechanical considerations probably cannot be held up against a two-handed reverse grip. And I don't think the discussion is over when it comes to that. Some of these grips might have existed. We see some of the depictions that sometimes swords are held in awkward ways. And then there's always the question, okay, if now something is happening, should I not be able to use it? That does not mean this is superior to the normal hold or whatever. For the Tonfa grip, there's definitely a surprise for me. It's much more useful than I anticipated it, and there are at least some depictions that indicate that there could have been situations where this might have been useful. With this, I hope this did inspire you, and I hope to see you around next time.